330 AD Rome rules from Rome. The last phrases of verse 23 say, Rome shall forecast his devices against the stronghold. This is better understood as Rome will forecast his devices from his stronghold. This seems the clearest understanding of this verse. The stronghold that Rome forecast his devices from was the city of Rome, even for a time. It is saying that Rome would prosecute taking control of the world from the city of Rome for 360 years. From the starting point of 31 BC, we had a time, 360 years, and this time prophecy comes to a conclusion in 330 AD. Then, the capital of the Roman Empire was moved from the city of Rome to the city of Constantinople. In the beginning of the Roman Empire, they were going to forecast their devices from the city of Rome for 360 years, and when the 360 years was up, this stronghold of Rome was no longer going to be a stronghold. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Daniel 11:25. This describes the final conquest of Egypt, which includes the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. The king of the south at this time isn't one of the line of Ptolemy, it's Mark Antony, who joined with Lepidus and Caesar to form a triumvirate, a three-party rule in Rome. One of their purposes was to avenge the assassination of Julius Caesar, and they all three began to go after things in their own ways. Ultimately, Mark Antony goes to Egypt, and depending on which historical testimony you want to believe, he either falls in love with Cleopatra in such a way that he can't control himself, or if you take the reasoning set forth by some, that the monarchy in Egypt was passed down through the female side, he may have realized, well, if I marry Cleopatra, then I become the king of Egypt. There's a logic to that, which seems to make sense. At this point in verse 25, the king of the south that the king is going to come against is Mark Antony, and verses 26 to 27 build upon this story. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Daniel 11:26, 27. Here we see the triumvirate, the three-man rule in Rome, was set up after Julius Caesar. Lepidus, Augustus Caesar and Mark Antony had come together to accomplish their task of controlling the world, and working revenge against Julius Caesar's enemies. They sat at the same table and talked about doing mischief together, but they were lying to one another, and their lies weren't going to prosper. Finally, when Caesar comes into Egypt to deal with Mark Antony, he is destroyed. When he is destroyed, he has his army in place to battle against another Roman army. Both are Roman armies, but he also has the Egyptian army of Cleopatra with him. As they see the folly of fighting with Mark Antony, one by one the Egyptian army and his army switches over to the other Roman army. The Egyptian army fled and Mark Antony is totally wiped out. This is what's being described in verse 25, he is not able to stand. When Caesar came back to Rome with all the booty from Egypt and all the human trophies, he would have had Cleopatra, but she committed suicide and so she isn't carried back into Rome. Verse 26 says, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him. This is talking about how Mark Antony's army turned on him. The troops he was counting on to come to his aid, when they saw the position he was in, switched over to Rome. That's what's being discussed in these verses. These verses are significant because this battle, where the king of the south, Mark Antony, is finally dealt with, is the Battle of Actium 31 BC, the starting point of the time of verse 24. One prophetic year is equal to 360 literal years, that Rome would rule the world from the city of Rome. Verse 27 is a concluding thought to this time prophecy, yet the end shall be at the time appointed. So, what we see about Rome is, it's going to be different from other world powers, it's going to use politics as well as military might, it's going to rule the world for a time, from the stronghold of Rome. The starting point for this power ruling the world is the battle where Mark Antony and his supporters are overthrown, and the end will be at the time appointed. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits, and return to his own land. Daniel 11:28. Caesar returns to Rome after this battle of Actium. He has all the booty that he has taken from Egypt, and he parades it through the streets of Rome. Historians testify this is just what he did. There are two returnings in this verse. The first returning is when he returns from conquering the king of the south and being established as the king of the earth, the fourth kingdom of Bible prophecy, in the year 31 BC. Then it says, his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. This returning is from the next conquest, that military campaign of Rome going down to Judah, and ultimately destroying Jerusalem and the temple in AD 70. This is why his heart is against the holy covenant, in the sense that he is going to destroy the temple, Jerusalem, and the people that once had been God's people. At the time appointed he shall return, and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former, or as the latter. Daniel 11:29. Now the time appointed jumps forward in history. Verse 27 says, the end shall be at the time appointed, and that Rome would forecast its power from the stronghold of the city of Rome for 360 years. The next verses are describing the starting point, 31 BC. Verse 27 is letting us know that the end of this time period of verse 24, the 360 years, will be at the time appointed. Verse 29 carries this thought forward, at the time appointed, in the year 330 AD, he shall return and come towards the south, but it shall not be as the former, or as the latter. The time appointed, the end of the 360 years in 330 AD, when the capital of the Roman Empire was moved from the city of Rome to Constantinople by Constantine, was the end of the supremacy of Rome. The 360 years of prophetic time had come to its close, and from that point on the ability of Rome to control the world at will through its military might and its political prowess, ceased. In 330 AD, when he moved the capital, then all the problems began for Rome. It was immediately divided into East and West, and the Western Empire immediately comes under attack from barbarians out of the north. The islands of the Mediterranean that Rome had formerly controlled, now become launching points for some of the powers designed by God to bring Rome down, and contribute to the environment needed for Rome to break up into the 10 horns and the 3 horns to be removed as in Daniel 7. Notice verse 29 says, at the time appointed he shall return, and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former, or as the latter. The former or later means when Rome attempts to defend itself and maintain its authority from Constantinople, the new capital of the kingdom, he won't have the ability to be successful in his military campaigns from that point on. It won't be as the former, like when he went into Egypt and dealt with Mark Antony and had such great success, nor will it be as the latter, when he went into Judea and destroyed the temple in AD 70 and wiped out Israel. He had success then, but in 330 from this point on, his military success wasn't going to be the same. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do, he shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. Daniel 11:30. The first Sunday laws. The ships of Chittim, of verse 30 are the Vandals. Their continued military success was weakening Rome, and as the emperor of Eastern Rome went out to do battle against them, he was defeated, or grieved. In an attempt to oppose the so-called Aryan beliefs of the three horns of the Heruli, Goths, and Vandals, Emperor Justinian appointed the Bishop of Rome as the head of the Christian Church and the corrector of heretics. By doing so he had indignation against the Holy Covenant, and had intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant, and the transition of Roman power from pagan to papal was underway. Verse 29 described the closing scenes of pagan Rome's authority. We see Constantine moving the capital away from Rome at the time appointed. In verse 30 we see his indignation against the Holy Covenant, as he introduces the first Sunday laws. We are told that when the United States passes a national Sunday law, national apostasy will be followed by national ruin. The same principles apply throughout history. After Constantine issues his Sunday laws, the Roman Empire begins to crumble. In former years when Rome warred against their enemies they found victory, but no longer.